going on, you guys? It is like 7 a.m. for me out here, Texas time. I just had a thought and just wanted to just make an impromptu video for you guys to kind of talk about this topic: fighting game betas and the importance of them. This is clearly inspired by all the crap going on with Tokon. Side note, I got my coffee here, so you'll probably see me sipping every now and again in between here. So let me catch a quick swig. Hold on. It's good stuff. Anyway, it's clearly inspired by all the crap with Tokon, and I think we do need to talk about it. I think so many people have kind of copped out when it comes to this topic. I feel like as long as I've been playing fighting games, like these games now in 2025 and beyond need these things to be able to get like the best product possible. And let me explain why. It kind of stems back to how things were in the past when it comes to fighting games and testing, right? Back then we had to wait for Japan to even release the game for us in the first place, right? Because, you know, it goes from arcade to console, right? Not the way it is now where it's like console then arcade or whatever, right? So only Japan had loc tests or location tests, right? It's very rare that America had location tests for some of these fighting games back in the day. The only one I can think of off the top of my head that I think for sure had a location test was CVS2. I think that was in like California, I want to say sometime back. My memory's really hazy on it. Sorry, it's been a hot minute. I spun the block here, you guys. So only Japan could test these games because they had location tests in Japan. So whatever those people would say, they put their little, you know, I've seen it before. They say what they got to say on a little feedback form. They put their little ballot in and they move on with their day, right? And that's pretty much how those games were balanced back then. Now, that's per version, right? Per version of the game, that's how they would do that, right? So like if it's Street Fighter 2 and going into like, I don't know, Alpha 1 to Alpha 2 to Alpha 3, they'll do Alpha 1 location test. Whatever the feedback is, that's the game. Alpha 2 location test and so forth, right? So a lot of things can get missed. A lot of players kind of found stuff and kept it hidden. You know, most notably Capcom vs SNK 2 with the bugs and glitches regarding specifically roll cancel. Marvel vs Capcom 2 also had issues. You know what I mean? Despite having a full testing team, it's like these things become issues. However, over the course of time, those games and the games of the past, people were eventually okay with discovering these things in the game because it kind of sort of opened the game up and made the game more unique. It went against what the developers wanted to do, and in that time frame there was no patchwork, so you had to wait for the next version to either get your character buffed or the game changed in a way that benefited you or the people in which you play with. Now that was the past. We fast forward into now, and I think of gaming now, and not just fighting games. That's why I said gaming intentionally here in this part, right? Because as a whole, multiplayer games in particular, single player games, there's a lot of early access versions of these games. Some are paid for, some are free. I think the vast majority it's kind of a 50-50 split nowadays, especially. When there's like a playtest of something, like we'll use a game like Arc Raiders, you didn't have to pay for it to test the game out, try it out and give your feedback, right? I'm sure there was a closed beta of some kind. If I recall right, you got in, you play the game, you give feedback, yada yada yada. That has been a typical feedback loop for gaming for a good while now. Same with early access, right? It'd be the same thing. Now, I know early access, if you bought into it, then, you know, since you paid for it, you might as well give your feedback. A lot of times people get into closed betas and don't really give feedback, so, you know, because it was free. So, and I mean, I'm not saying that you guys, if some of you guys watching this have participated in betas and did not give feedback, but just think of the vast majority of people that participate and don't give feedback. That also kind of contributes to the game, right? Now, where am I going with this? Because you have early access by way of betas, alphas, this is like the best time to be able to tell the developers things, That means any bugs, glitches, game breaking things, like it should be figured out here to the best of our ability as consumers, right? Because part of them giving us the chance to play the game is to give them feedback to make the game better. If you participate and you don't give the feedback, that doesn't really help them. You got to enjoy something for a period of time, but that your enjoyment is cool, but your feedback is that much more important, especially when we talk about fighting games who don't have such a large sample size in comparison to a game like Arc Raiders or any other shooter, third person shooter, first person shooter, MOBA, whatever. You can actually see that these player bases are larger and they can give a large amount of feedback because there's such a vast majority of players, right? So where does that lie with our fighting games? I feel it's the same. If you don't allow people to use the training mode, whether it's bare bones or full or not is irrelevant. The notion remains that we cannot figure out things about the game to be able to either A, speak good about it based on our findings, B, find game breaking things that you can mitigate before launch, and C, obviously we're here to test your network, right? So I think that point in particular is the one that I want to drive home. I think what's been bothering me over the course of time is like I've just kind of grown tired of constantly hearing, oh well, it's to test the network, it's to test the network, it's to test the net. It's like, when you think about it, let's say any given company only has maybe about 100 people to test the game. That's a decent sample size. Then you do a beta, and then you have an even larger sample size that goes past 100. Let's say that you had maybe somewhere around 2,000 beta code to give out to people, right? People get in on the beta, they give their feedback. Hopefully all 1,000 and some change give you the feedback. 2,000, whatever number it is that they decide to go for, give the feedback, right? So you're able to not only use the 100 in-house, now you have an additional 2,000 plus to give you what you're looking for. Most people, when they speak about the network, at least in some of the most recent games, we haven't really had major issues. The only game I can think off the top of my head that I know did have issues with its networking was City of the Wolves in most recent times. The KOF 15 also did have some online issues during its beta time, but those things obviously got ironed out. Now, those games aside, I'm sure there's others. You don't gotta crucify me for it. That's not the point here. Isn't about picking any particular game, right? We're still looking at why it's important. We really and truly need to be able to give them the proper feedback. And I say that as someone that watched Avatar over the weekend and played a little bit, right? And seeing at the end of the playtest, they found infinites and things of that nature. People wouldn't have been able to find those infinites without training mode because I don't think there was a versus CPU mode. I know it had an offline versus, but offline versus, like not everyone has a homie that can just sit here and practice with like that. Now that game's training mode was very bare bones. Was that okay? Absolutely. Now, without that training mode, finding those infinites would have been way harder, and that's not good for the developers of the game. If the game came out and those infinites were there, all everyone's gonna do is just say, oh man, look, infinites in freaking Avatar, that game's a piece of shit. Oh, that game's a joke. How did those devs make a beta and miss all that? Then they have all these people. And then you think about that part where it's like, well, devs should know to let them test that out too. Which is why I'm saying this in the first place, for people to understand what they're doing, find more stuff that's game breaking before launch, because I personally can't think of any developer that has that strong in-house testing to where they're finding that much stuff. That is a lot of burnout. I can tell you from experience as someone who did it for Streets of Rage 4 when I was helping them with that game. It's a lot of, it can be exhausting for a singular person to just look for many bugs and glitches and ways to break a game. When you have a larger sample size, what ends up happening is those people stumble across those things and they will share that information. The amount of information that gets shared nowadays on Twitter, socials in general, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, Instagram, social media has made it so that we can catch something pretty fast. You know what I mean? And the developers, it would do well for them to look into social media, which I'm sure they already do, and be able to find the information that they need about their game that they might be missing. Now, us as players, if we're missing stuff, that's understandable. But if the developers are missing something, that's a whole nother ballgame. Pulling myself out of the content creator role for a second and putting myself in the consumer position. Clearly, I want the best product. I don't want to see these said things in the game, right? On the flip side, there's people who's like, nah, leave it. It's great. This makes the game better. And it's like, does it? Do infinites make a game better? No. Do, unfortunately to say, people who love unblockables, that doesn't make a game good either. Because I've seen this happen countless times where I've heard, just for the sake of this, right? You know, I come from the era of older Guilty Gear, and unblockables are like rampant. That's a part of the game. And there's many newer people that were happy that there were no unblockables in Strive. Fast forward to Tokon, I'm seeing some of the similar people are happy to see unblockables in this game. And to me, that makes no sense. You see what I'm saying? Kind of a double-edged sword. And those things come by in part of seeing how things were in previous Marvel games where, oh, it's wild, so we should make this wild too. Maybe to some degree I can vouch for that. But that's not, I don't think that's the greatest way to go about it, right? You can make the game fun without that portion included. Let me reel it all back in, right? To push that aside. Why this is important again is when I think of games that have had shaky launches. One of the most prominent ones to me that sticks out is Final Fantasy XIV. Many people paid for that product and completely asked for their money back. And obviously Square obliged, realized that they made a half-baked game, took it back, and now it's one of the best MMOs in existence. It's one of the tops, one of the best you could play right now, with consistent updates and all that. We all know Cyberpunk had a rocky launch, No Man's Sky, quite a few other games that had rocky launches that were able to bounce back. You know, that is something that is really difficult with fighting games, right? People already have like a big misconception that fighting games are difficult, right? Then you tack on things like infinites and things that just don't look good, and it's twice as bad of a look for someone who just wants to play, because in their mind, well, if I jump online, I'm gonna have to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that, blah. You know, I can just go play Expedition 33. You know, there's so many games that are fighting for people's attention that it is very imperative that a fighting game in particular plays well. You don't want to lose them to, respectfully, as much as I love this game, you don't want to lose them to like a Ninja Gaiden 4, Expedition 33. You want the players to be able to balance their time in between these games. You know, it's always going to be a battle for, you know, a consumer's time, you know, or a player's time. So it's in your best interest to have the strongest product possible on launch. But this changes when you start hearing things like, well, we don't need training mode, we don't need this, and we don't need that. It's just a beta. It's just a beta. That statement also in itself is painful, because saying it's just a beta, while everyone would agree with that, it doesn't mean that we as consumers don't have room for concern. Or we shouldn't say what we think is wrong. If we as consumers are seeing it one way and the developers have it another way, fair. Maybe there's something within their design philosophy that we might be missing, and that's totally fair. Trust me, I've definitely seen it. I've definitely kind of changed my thought process around certain games because of that. You know, I'm not sitting here telling you I'm perfect in that regard, right? I have my own faults. I'm a human being, obviously, right? I'm not perfect, and neither you guys watching this, right? So it's not about, oh, you switched up. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, and it's okay to have an aha moment. Oh, okay, I get it. You know, this isn't about making any one person feel bad or any group feel bad. It's just, oh, okay, I see. This was an issue we probably didn't really consider, or maybe this wasn't as bad as we thought it was, etc., etc. You know, But just because it's a beta doesn't excuse the things that we find unattractive, undesirable. That doesn't excuse that feeling, because part of video games also is feeling. So if we feel this isn't like fun or enjoyable, we should speak. We are also spending dollars. Now, on top of that, I know there are those that will look at it and be like, well, I don't want the training mode because I don't want to get beat up. But there are also people who want to learn how to play. I know the developers ride that fine line of that, but if there was any time for any new person to get beat up, it would be the beta, not the full launch. Because full launch, you had to pay for that. You had to pay for that ass whooping. It's a beta. The only thing that you're investing in is your time. So that therein lies why I'm saying, like, if there's any time to figure things out and try to help them make the best game possible, is the beta. Because if we think about the current games that are out and the developers, there's only like one developer in the immediate that can do the things that we would potentially want them to do with their fighting game, and that's Riot. Riot can, at a whim, and maybe I'm overstating this here, so let me scale that back, right? If they see fit, they can change animations, they can readjust things. Does it cost resources? Yes, but they've already proven that they can do that. They've changed Yasuo's level 3 a little bit, they've adjusted the cinematics. Ari has a whole new level 3. Like, if they want to adjust, they can. And ArcSys, Capcom, Bandai Namco, a lot of these companies don't really have that firepower, if you will, to be able to completely like rework a character. Like, I'd imagine in 2XKO, if a character's underperforming, they just rework them. You know, they could change animations. They get to do something in particular with 2XKO that not very many developers can do in the first place. Sometimes they add new animations, but it's by way of maybe 1 or 2, give or take. That doesn't mean that it's not possible, but for them, it's like, why are we gonna backtrack with this when we can just do that instead? You know, they'll just find another alternative, maybe put a band-aid on it, as some would say, and that's kind of it. That kind of fixes the character. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's always a point of contention where, what if this was a different normal, or what if this did this instead? You know, that's something at the moment that I can think of only Riot would be able to do. Current developers would probably just have to repurpose the move, right? Like, if this move has this property, then we'll just readjust the properties, as opposed to a whole new animation with a whole new hitbox. That's what I mean. So, with all that being said, the game is going to get figured out during a beta. It's going to get figured out during full release. How much of that figured out plays a role on the community and how much people are playing, how hungry people are for knowledge, what they're, you know, in a new fighting game, like, especially even in a beta, it's just like a lot of people have a thirst for knowledge and they want to know what works. Some of them will go through the rigmarole and sit there and use, like in this game's case, you know, the versus CPU, and try to find as much as they can. I'm gonna be real, the time it takes for the rematch, which isn't very long, victory screens, not very long, rematch, not very long, but that time eventually adds up, and like, it takes away from the learning experience. I've said this countless times, and I'm gonna say it again. Like, we're in 2025, and a fighting game having a training mode inside of its demo is not gonna hurt at all. New people can learn things, old people can learn things, and people can have a better semblance of what the game has to offer. I think the sense of discovery when the game comes out is gonna still be there, especially with a larger roster. If, for example, if any game, we'll use Tokon in this case, there was 8 characters that were playable this last demo. As long as you're only showing off the demo with these characters, showcasing you have more characters on the way, it's understandable that those 8 characters will probably get figured out to some capacity. How high that capacity, that just depends, but it's gonna happen. Like, it's like inevitable. Making us wait for full launch to try to figure the game out, or whatever the meta is for certain characters, it's not gonna change. It'll still get figured out pretty quickly. Whether it's a month, 2 months, Sure, I get that as a developer, you want the players to be able to figure this stuff out on launch. But I feel like you already run the risk of players wanting to learn more regardless of your beta status. Some people are just gonna, get 2 accounts, play on one and then play on the other. I'd imagine there's some people that have friends that they try to sit there, hey man, can you just stand still? Don't worry bro, I got this. It's such a cumbersome way. It's like a cumbersome roundabout way to learn. This isn't the early 2000s when Marvel vs. Capcom, or the late 90s, where you learn a fighting game in the arcade until the console port. No, it's okay. If little Timmy is getting beat up by someone better than him, he can just go find someone else who's probably on his skill level. He might even have a friend that he could play against, and that's okay too. I guess I'm just trying to say at the end game of all of this is just, we have to stop, because even as consumers, we want the best product. And the only way to get the best product is to get the feedback. And if the goal is to wait until season 3, which has been kind of sort of my crux for this talk in particular, if we have to wait for season 3 to get the game that we want, not very many people have that much patience. They're just gonna move on to something else until the game finally becomes what it needs to be, and then they'll probably play it. But by that time, you've already lost a lot of player retention, which I think that's another point of contention with fighting games. We don't need to be losing people because their attention span is short these days. It's not for nothing. It's not like, yo, people are just dumb. Not necessarily the case. I mean, some people can be dumb, or silly, right? But it's not anything of that nature. It's just people are going to spend their time how they see fit. And if they don't feel like a product is worth their time, they're just gonna play something else. And there's a lot of alternatives to fighting games that will hold their attention, especially if they're free to play. So my end game here is that we need them. We need to stop acting like we don't need them. We need to literally just cut that part out. I think moving forward, any other fighting game that comes out, and this is for all the devs out there, any fighting game you decide to release in the upcoming years, it is important that you allow people to be able to train in your games and understand how your game works, so that not only can they test the network like you want them to, but they can give you feedback on game-breaking bugs and glitches, so that you don't have to miss them on launch. It really does mean a lot, for the overall product, for the longevity, for the quality control of your game, for the player retention, because first impressions, they mean a lot. And if a lot of people's first impression of a product is not very good, even in its early stages, something needs to be done about it, because all it takes is word of mouth, and it can, dare I say, kill a product. Any singular game, product, whatever, can essentially fade away due to the public not appreciating it. They might not like it, and if they don't like it, it's just gonna spread word of mouth like wildfire. And in today's time and climate with gaming, when a vast majority of people are just against something, unfortunately people draw that line in the sand, as much as it shouldn't be there. But people, they get hard stuck on how they feel, and it's gonna take a lot more convincing after the first impression for them to be able to stay on board with your product. So just speaking on this, because I think it needs to be said, I think we tiptoe around this too much, and I think someone needs to bring this to the table and put it out there, because I don't think this is gonna be sustainable moving forward. It should be normal practice, because if every other genre in existence is offering players the ability to do similar things, I just don't think it makes sense. So I ain't gonna take it too much more of y'all's time. This is just me being candid, being completely honest, not sugarcoating it, just straight off the dome. Like I said, I just woke up and just felt the need to just kind of talk this out, just get it out of my head. So let me know how you guys feel about this in the comments below. If I missed something about it, maybe I'll run it back and do another one and just do some post adding. But yeah, talk to me, let me know. Do we need training mode? Oh my, we need them. Just talk about it in the comments, man. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.